Even at 21, I never grew out of the Halloween spirit. I still dressed up, went to pumpkin patches, and spent all of October watching horror movies with a glass of wine and a blanket. But that year, Halloween felt a little different. I had recently moved to a small town in Pennsylvania for work. I was a pharmaceutical rep, long hours, constant travel, and my new job meant being over 2 hours away from family and friends. Most holidays, I spent alone, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from enjoying my favorite night of the year. So I decorated my little house, bought too much candy, and promised myself I'd make the best of it. That Halloween evening, as I walked up the path to my front door, I could hear kids laughing and shouting for candy just a few houses down. I hurried my pace, not wanting to miss out on the fun of handing out sweets. But when I reached my porch, I noticed something odd. There was a white envelope shoved under my welcome mat. No return address. Just 2 words written neatly on the front. For Allison. Curious and a little amused, I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Allison, how are you? I hope you're settling in well. I'll keep this brief, because there isn't much time. Tonight, Halloween night, make sure by 10 p.m. all your doors and windows are locked. And no matter what happens, do not open your door after 10 p.m. I don't care what you hear, or what you think you see. Do not open the door. Things beyond our comprehension will occur, and you must not let them in. Please heed my warning. I only wish for your safety. With love, your Aunt Cynthia. I read it twice. Aunt Cynthia? I didn't have an Aunt Cynthia. I looked around, expecting to see a prankster hiding nearby, maybe one of the neighbors trying to give me a scare. But the street looked perfectly normal. I tossed the letter aside, laughing it off. It was Halloween after all, probably just some kid having fun. By 9:15 p.m., my candy bowl was almost empty. I'd been going back and forth between answering the door and watching a horror movie marathon, sipping red wine between knocks. Honestly, I was having a great time, even alone. By 9:45, things had quieted down. No more kids. The streets were empty. I decided to call it a night and watch one last movie, John Carpenter's Halloween, my favorite. I got up to turn off the porch light, signaling I was out of candy. That's when I noticed the time on my phone, 10 p.m. For some reason, that number made me pause. The letter. I smirked to myself, a little buzzed from the wine, and shook it off. Nice try, Aunt Cynthia, I muttered. But as I reached for the light switch, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow knocks, then a voice. Soft, childlike. Trick or treat. I froze. There was something strange about the voice, distorted somehow. Too flat, too calm. I cleared my throat. Sorry, I'm out of candy. No answer. I waited, hands still on the light switch. That's when the doorknob started to turn. My heart jumped. I lunged forward and locked it, sliding the deadbolt across. I said, I'm out of candy. Please leave. Silence. Then the voice again. Lower this time, Allison. Open the door. The warmth drained from my body. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. A long pause, then a whisper that sent chills through me. Allison, we both know they can't help you. The door suddenly rattled, violently. The frame groaned, wood splintering at the edges. I screamed and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what was happening, and then silence. The shaking stopped. The voice was gone. I crept toward the window, clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed from the counter. Through the blinds, I saw flashing red and blue lights, police cars, ambulances, parked right outside my neighbor's house. I cracked the door open, just enough to see what was happening. A police officer sprinted toward me, his uniform stained dark red. Ma'am, please, he said, breathing hard. Lock your doors and windows and stay inside for the rest of the night. I nodded, too stunned to speak. He ran off before I could ask any questions. I locked everything again and sat on my couch for the rest of the night, wide awake, gripping that stupid letter like a lifeline. The next morning, the news gave me my answer. They called it the Halloween Massacre. My next-door neighbors, the Doyles, a family of 6, all found dead. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no explanation, just gone. I felt sick. I grabbed a letter from where I'd left it and called my mom. "Mom," I asked, voice shaking, "do I have an Aunt Cynthia?" There was a pause. "Allison, what kind of question is that? Why? Please, Mom, just answer me." I could hear her swallow hard. "Technically, yes, but she died before you were born. She was my younger sister. Her umbilical cord got wrapped around her neck during birth." My heart dropped. I looked back down at the letter and noticed something I hadn't before. Writing on the back, it said, "Sweetie, there's always been good and evil in this world. It's up to us to protect the ones we love. We've never met, not in this life, but I am your guardian. Stay blessed, Allison. Stay safe." I pressed the letter to my chest and started to cry. That night, I realized something. Whatever was knocking at my door, it wasn't human, and someone or something had protected me from it. My Aunt Cynthia, my guardian angel. This happened 5 years ago, on Halloween night. At the time, the pandemic had shut nearly everything down. I was restless, stuck at home, and craving some kind of human connection. That's when I started talking again with Leo, a guy I had dated a while back. Things between us had ended awkwardly, some tension, a bit of resentment, but we'd always shared a weird bond over horror movies and H.P. Lovecraft stories, so, wanting to clear the air and maybe rekindle a little bit of friendship, I asked if he wanted to go for a walk that night. To my surprise, he said yes. We met under the old church near our neighborhood around 9:30. The streets were unusually silent. No parties, no trick-or-treaters, no Halloween buzz, just the faint echo of our footsteps in the cold air. It was eerie, even for Halloween night. We decided to head toward the old part of town. Normally, it's full of tourists and life streetlights, laughter, and music. But that night, it felt abandoned. The empty stone streets and shuttered cafes made the place feel like a ghost town. Before long, we reached the foot of the castle, one of Quebec City's landmarks. There, we had 2 options: turn back the way we came, or continue along a narrow boardwalk by the cliff's edge that led to a park. The path was dark, surrounded by tall trees, and honestly a bit creepy, but we were caught up in conversation, so we decided to keep going as we walked. I started joking about how perfect the setting was for a horror movie. 2 people alone on a dark path, miles from anyone on Halloween night. I even stood under a flickering streetlight and laughed, saying, "This is exactly where the killer would show up." We laughed it off, but something about that moment stuck with me. A strange feeling that something unseen was nearby, just out of sight. After about 10 minutes, we made it to the park and decided to loop back. When we got close to the old town entrance again, the atmosphere had completely changed. The silence was gone. Police cars and ambulances were racing toward the castle. Flashing lights filled the streets. We stopped a bystander to ask what was going on. He said there was a man running around with a knife, attacking people. At first, I thought it was a prank, someone taking Halloween way too seriously. But the man's tone told me otherwise. He warned us to go home and lock the doors. I walked Leah home, then hurried to my own place, my nerves finally catching up with me. As soon as I got inside, I checked my phone, and that's when the reality hit me. My social media was flooded with posts and alerts. Around 10:30 that night, a man dressed in medieval-style clothing had gone on a killing spree in the old part of Quebec City. He was armed with a katana sword. 2 people were dead, and 5 others were critically injured. All of it happened completely at random. As I read more details, my stomach dropped. The attacks had started right near the castle, just minutes after we'd walked past that very spot. If we had decided to turn back instead of taking the boardwalk, we would have crossed paths with him. Later, I learned that one of my friends had also been out that night, not far from where we'd been. He wasn't as lucky. The killer attacked him. He survived, but lost a finger in the process. Now, even after all these years, I still think about that night, how normal it started, how close we came to danger without realizing it, and how one simple choice, taking one path instead of another, can change everything. Sometimes, the difference between life and death really is just a matter of which way you turn. I've always loved Halloween, the eerie glow of jack-o'-lanterns, the chill in the air, and that strange excitement that comes with being just a little scared. This year, I wanted to make it unforgettable. I planned everything down to the smallest detail, the decorations, the music, the games, all designed to create the perfect mix of fun and fear. I just didn't know that this Halloween would turn into a nightmare I'd never escape. At first, the party was everything I'd hoped for. Guests arrived in their best costumes, vampires, ghosts, monsters, you name it. Laughter filled the house as we drank, snacked, and admired the eerie atmosphere I'd worked so hard to create. For a while, it was perfect. But as the night went on, strange things started to happen. Lights flickered. Candles went out even though there was no draft. At first, we laughed it off. After all, it was Halloween. A little weirdness was part of the charm. But then, things got darker. Someone suggested we play a game of hide and seek in the dark. It sounded fun, creepy, but harmless. I volunteered to be it. Everyone else scattered, giggling as they ran to hide. I began to count. When I opened my eyes, the house suddenly felt different, too quiet. The laughter had stopped, room by room. I searched, but no one answered when I called their names. The deeper I went, the colder the air became, like the warmth was being sucked out of the walls. My own footsteps echoed down the halls, mocking me in the silence. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft at first, coming from somewhere below. The basement. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, but I couldn't. I grabbed the flashlight and crept down the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The air smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. The whisper grew louder as I approached the door at the far end. A faint green light spilled through the crack. My hand shook as I pushed the door open. Inside, my friends stood in a circle, their faces pale and frozen in expressions of pure terror. They were chanting, low, rhythmic, in a language I didn't recognize. Strange glowing symbols pulsed in their hands, and in the center of the circle stood something that should not exist. It was tall, misshapen, its body twisting as if reality couldn't decide what it should look like. Its eyes, too many of them, locked onto mine. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The door slammed shut behind me. The creature began to move toward me, slow and deliberate, its every step radiating malice. That's when I realized this wasn't a game. This was a ritual, and I was the offering. In blind panic, I grabbed the first thing I could find, an old dust-covered book on a nearby shelf. It was filled with the same glowing symbols my friends had been holding. Without thinking, I started reading them aloud. The air rippled. The creature shrieked, a sound that felt like it was clawing at my skull. The light grew brighter with every word. My voice trembled, but I kept going. My friends collapsed to the floor as the thing writhed in agony, its form breaking apart in the blinding light. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, the creature was gone. My friends were unconscious, but alive. None of them remembered anything when they woke. It was as if the entire nightmare had been erased from their minds. We left the basement in silence. I locked the door behind us, and I've never opened it again. The party was over, but I still hear echoes of that night in my dreams. The chanting, the whispers, that thing's unblinking eyes. That Halloween taught me something I'll never forget. There's a fine line between make-believe horror and real terror, and sometimes, on Halloween night, that line disappears. It really was an incredible party. Honestly, if I had to choose one of the happiest, most wonderful nights of my life, that Halloween party would be it. And that's exactly why it hurts so much to remember it now. It breaks me to think about what happened, the awful, horrifying thing that took place right under our noses while we were laughing, drinking, and celebrating. Looking back, it feels so obvious. But hindsight is always cruelly clear, isn't it? I've never been great at meeting new people. Once I get comfortable, I can hold a conversation just fine. But that first introduction always feels awkward, forced. Online, though, it's easier. Text doesn't judge, and I can take my time replying. Because of that, most of my friends live far away. A few are close enough to meet in person, and before the party, we used to get together pretty often. Now, I can barely stand the thought of it. It was during one of those hangouts that the four of us, me, Jessica, her girlfriend Sadie, and Jake, started talking about throwing a real party. A big one. We wanted to invite all our online friends, the ones we actually trusted. And after tossing ideas around, I suggested Halloween. It just felt right. Jessica wanted a mythology theme. She's always been into legends and epic tales. Sadie, writing a horror movie kick I'd encouraged, suggested a horror film theme. But it was Jake, our token straight friend, who offered the winning idea. Let's just do a classic Halloween party, he said. Pumpkins, apple bobbing, spooky games, something timeless and simple. We loved it immediately. No complicated costumes, no obscure themes, just nostalgia wrapped in orange lights and fake cobwebs. We each agreed to handle one activity. Sadie set up a pumpkin autopsy carving station, complete with medical props. Jessica found an old wooden barrel for apple bobbing and painted Halloween monsters on the sides. I took over the bathroom, setting it up for a creepy mirror game, where guests could sit by candlelight and stare into their reflection until their mind started to twist it. Jake said he'd handle a game of Dead Man's Brains. If you've ever read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, you know it. The game where guests feel inside boxes labeled like eyes, fingers, brains, each filled with peeled grapes, cold spaghetti, or some other gross substitute. Jake said he'd make his own version. Weeks of planning turned into days. And before we knew it, Halloween had arrived. Sadie and I got to Jessica's house early to set up, but Jake was nowhere to be found. We texted and called, but he didn't answer. Strange, he was usually the most punctual one. People started arriving. Ashley and Dawn, just back from their honeymoon. Sock and his boyfriend. Carlos from Brazil. Elizabeth from France. Astra in her detailed Napoleonic soldier's outfit. Everyone was in high spirits. The house buzzed with laughter and conversation. Then finally, a knock at the door. It was Jake. He stood there in a full World War I infantry costume, gas mask, Brody, helmet, and all, carrying several dark wooden boxes. Without saying a word, he handed me a folded note. Sorry, I'm late. Lost my train card and caught a cold. Lost my voice too. I'll probably have to leave early, but I didn't want to miss the party. Phone's dead, so I couldn't message. I smiled and told him it was fine. He just nodded stiffly. There was something off about him, but I couldn't put my finger on it. We set up his game. 5 boxers, neatly labeled eyes, guts, fingers, heart, and brain. He didn't say a word, just nodded at our compliments and gestures of thanks. The night was perfect. Music, laughter, card games, candlelight, all of us together for the first time, finally, real and present. Jessica's apple bobbing station was a hit. Sadie's pumpkin autopsy had everyone laughing. My mirror game got creepy fast. The Bloody Mary chants didn't help. But Jake's dead man's brains stole the show. When it was my turn, I only made it to the box labeled guts before I gagged and tapped out, laughing. Everyone teased me, but it was all in good fun as the night wound down. Jake quietly slipped me another note, thanking Jessica for hosting and apologizing for leaving early. We all hugged him goodbye. He gave us a little salute before walking into the night. We went to bed feeling warm and content, blissfully unaware. It wasn't until morning that I noticed the smell, rotten, sweet, and sour. The scent of meat left out too long. It was coming from the boxes, cursing. I put on gloves and reached into the first one, eyes. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because suddenly everyone was awake. The police came within minutes. They kept asking what Jake looked like. We told them we didn't know. We'd never seen his face, just the gas mask. Inside those boxes, they found human remains. Real ones. Eyes, fingers, guts, a heart, and in the final box, a head skull opened cleanly at the top. They told us later it was Jake's.